Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Doria on Twitter, and you can find him. I always get confused with the Twitter, but it's the Mathu at Doria is the name, and then the handle is at M_E_Doria, Doria. And we're going to talk about Kinode, and he's the lead developer at Kinode. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Very excited about this interview. I've been investigating Kinode. Only sort of tangentially, I did an interview with Aleph Dow about a little bit about the basic. I know he's not the main spokesperson for this, and I'm really excited to have you on because I believe you are one of the main spokesperson to go really into the technical details of distributed computing. What is distributed computing?
Well, first off, that's right, and I haven't been able to listen to your podcast with Aleph Dow yet, but I'm excited to do so. It just came out. So, to answer your question, I guess people have a lot of different definitions. It also gets called like peer-to-peer software. You could be as broad as saying that distributed computing is everything that happens like over the internet or like, across multiple machines. But given our shared context, it's maybe more specific to say that it's a new architecture for doing stuff on the internet, where instead of having most of the work happen on a single server and users plug into that, users run services and communicate with other users directly.
And so why did the model of the client server model succeed? What did it do for us that is no longer important, or can be done in better ways?
Well, this is a subjective question, so maybe other people will have different answers. But my perspective on that history is that basically there was a software stack that got built that made it really easy to write services in the sort of traditional server client way, and that sort of caught fire, and people templated off that and copied off it and built all the things that we use today. So like generally, like developers are like very lazy, and a lot of coding work is copying and pasting, right? So like and this happens even like at a very high conceptual level, where you might not actually be using the copy and paste shortcuts, but you are templating your entire project off of an architecture that was like proven out. So if an architecture does get proven out and get like product market fit, sort of take it all the way to a business, people will just do that thing, right, with variations for decades. So with web services, that was basically like the LAMP stack, or like Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, and that led to being able to write code where you could just like spin up a server, write some like add a database, add some code around the database, and write a front end website, and people could just log in and do stuff. And that probably created like $1 trillion worth of business, maybe like multi-trillions. So yeah, that was a very successful setup, and it wasn't a bad thing necessarily, but now we're starting to see like potentially use cases for other setups. And I don't even want to get into the whole moral component of this, because it's very hard to convince people to change their behaviors for moral reasons. Especially, I mean, maybe that's, I mean that specifically in the context of computing. It's hard to tell somebody, oh, like don't use TikTok, it's bad for your brain. Like it's a very hard sell.
Which is like the fundamental problem of where we are now, because it's like
Mhm.
this goes, and I believe we talked about it when we first talked about doing the show, is that it's just I don't think that these solutions are going to be for the mainstream, or at least maybe not for the mainstream for a while, until the really useful applications get built. with an entirely distributed framework.
Yeah, well, I mean, sorry, continue.
No, no, that was the thought.
So yeah, so I could actually push back on that and say, like, we're really trying to make it and find the things that are going to be immediately useful in a purely utilitarian sense of just like, oh, like this is a useful thing. I can't do this anywhere else. Like I'm going to use this stack for it. Um,
So what are
so
the use cases for that?
So this is, I mean, this is where we can start talking about crypto, because to me, like the, so like when you talk about like distributed computing, right, or like peer-to-peer software, that's like by no means a new thing at all. Like there's there's nothing like particularly novel about doing stuff peer-to-peer. People have been doing that since the very beginning. It like it genuinely predates the other construction that I was just talking about. Like it's like the first internet was just people like running servers and talking to each other, and every user had their own server, right? So like that was discarded not because like it wasn't like evil corporations or like people's like laziness, like, or it's like, oh, like I can't run my own software, because remember, like, the first people using the internet were all software like engineers and system administrators, and like they could do it, and it became um, superior to put users on a single server. You could do things that you couldn't do before. Specifically, like you could take like a relational database and put a bunch of people's data in that database and then do like novel things with the data. So like, for example, right, if if you had like, if everybody had their own blog, right, you could post on your own blog. That's cool, right? People might read it. They might go to your website and read it. And you in your blog would have like some sort of database that holds your blog posts and your metadata, and people could like search for things that they thought, like they would search for keywords, and then blog posts that you had written with those keywords would pop up, right? That's all. Oh, that's all very like straightforward. But like you they would have to go to your website and they would only be able to search for your blog posts. But if you used a blogging platform that a million other people were also using, people could discover your posts in the big global list by searching for a word. And that's the kind of thing that you like. That was because we put all the data in the database on a single logical server that, by the way, is multiple machines under the hood anyway. So it's like it's all distributed computing at the hardware level.
Always has been. Always.
Yeah, right. And so like that's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, people just like had uses for this setup that were actually really good, and as I said, like created a ton of value. So the point being that you don't there's no like free lunch of like, oh, we're gonna like re-decentralize and make it like blog posting again. Like that's not there. Like there's reasons that people walked away from that. So that's why we're really focused on crypto at Kinode. And I personally am very focused on crypto as like the reason to do this, and always have been, because like, yeah, like there's finally like a new thing that you can do with software. And I can get into this further, but yeah, I can elaborate on that.
Um, so very interesting. I just came up with a meme from what you just said about the trope, which is the guy and the two astronauts in front of the
Yeah.
and so I just made that meme. And so peer-to-peer servers, it's always been distributed computing, and then there's crypto, and now crypto allows us to do a few things. Bitcoin allows us to store value, it seems.
Yes.
It also allows us to transfer money,
Indeed.
and cheaper than Ethereum, which I think is interesting. I gotta go check that because the last couple times I've tried to use Ethereum to transfer things, it costed me 4 times the amount of money that I'm transferring in order to transfer the money on Ethereum. But then
Sounds like you gotta transfer more money.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And Wait, is it the same? If I transfer more money on Ethereum, does it actually change the network to how much money it costs, or is it
No, it doesn't. Which is why the joke is like, if your transaction fee is more than the value of the transaction, then transact at a higher value.
you're not
I
rich
mean,
enough? You're not rich enough.
I'm happy. I'm actually really happy to talk about Ethereum because it's like that's a very interesting topic to me, and I have sort of like what I think are very conventional, but it turned out to be rather unconventional ideas about like blockchain value. So we could talk about that for sure.
Okay, yeah, and so we got Bitcoin, we got Ethereum, we have USDT on the Tron network, which I find endlessly hilarious.
Well, USDT is Tether actually, so that's across multiple chains, but
So
it is on Tron and Ethereum and other like Solana and everything.
and I meant that USDT on Tron network is for some reason the only ones that Argentines accept. Um,
Mm,
as
yes.
and I'm on Coinbase. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm as an American citizen, it's almost impossible not to be on Coinbase. Uh, and so I can only I have to pay a lot of money first to even buy USDT and then to send it. But
Yes.
USDT is free to send, but nobody in Argentina accepts it, which it's so funny.
So
It feels like the
yeah,
1990s in terms of in being in Argentina and actually using crypto for the first time in my life to do real everyday things. And it feels like I'm in the 1990s using the internet the first time, which is really fun.
it is. It's awesome, and I am also in Argentina right now, as you know. But it's very funny. Like I came down here a couple months ago, and I was using crypto to get cash because it's like the easiest way, right? And I I was doing USDT on Ethereum because I've never used Tron. I think I should. I think it's sort of I really should I should get into Tron because it's big down here. But I had to pay a little extra for them to accept the USDT on Ethereum because they wanted to cover their gas fee. Now at the time that was like $6, and it's crazy to think that was like literally 2 months ago. But yeah, now it probably is $100 or 50 at least.
Interesting. And that's only because we're in a bull market, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. I just tweeted last night. I was like, nobody transacts on that block space anymore. It's too crowded. So kind of sums up my ideas.
Yeah. Okay. And so let's go before we're going into the why the computing is matter and why the peer-to-peer virtual servers matter. Let's complete the current landscape of crypto.
Yeah,
And that is Solana, the Solana near protocol. People have been mentioning IOTA, Cardano. What's your take on all of these? Should we include them in the things that are actually useful to do?
sure. I mean, the list goes on too. We've got Aptos and Sui. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that one right. There's Fuel. There's a bunch of chains, and that's not even getting into rollups, right? Which are significant. I mean, everybody can draw the line of like what's a real coin and what's a shit coin on their own, right? But no, I think they're all quite valid, and this I guess would be a good segue for me to talk about like why I what I look for in block space. So so like I mean the big thing, the big sort of like narrative conflict right now is between Ethereum and Solana, where like obviously Solana is like much faster and cheaper to use. It's a really good user experience. If you haven't gotten into trading meme coins on Solana yet, I definitely recommend it. It's good market research if you're a crypto person. And by the way, like people in Argentina could be using Solana, but they're using Tron, which is interesting and also demands inspection. So yeah, so Solana is a lot faster and cheaper, and yet people are using Ethereum, and so you have to ask the question of like why do people do things on specific blockchains? Um, there's a couple dimensions. There's like security, there's liquidity, there's pure business development, right? There's just marketing, and then there's access to specific assets. So a lot of people use this analogy. I think it's apt. I mean, other people might disagree, but Ethereum block space layer 1 is like the Manhattan of blockchains, right? It's highly desirable block space. Um, if you can afford to be on that block space, you probably are at one point or another, and that's like the why I think it's such a great meme to talk about how nobody uses that chain anymore. It's too crowded, you know. And if you compare that to what other layer ones are doing, I think the really interesting thing is that you have people competing on space and cost. So you've got competitors, and you know the competition is very friendly, and there's absolutely room for like many chains in the world. I don't think that there's going to be like a single dominant chain by any means. But like they're competing on space and they're saying, hey, look, you know, we've got lots of block space for you and it's cheap too. You know, that's kind of like looking out towards like, you know, the tracts of land in Oklahoma and saying, hey, look, you know, why don't you build your condo here? And actually people do that. You see that the tallest building in the world is going to be in Oklahoma. But but that's kind of the comparison being made, right? So it's like these are fundamentally different products that are being sold, and the prices reflect that.
Okay, that's really interesting. So basically what you're saying is we're in a Wild West scenario where Manhattan has already been colonized or whatever, and turning into a city, and you know you've got your 1800 robber barons who are already in charge of it, and you know they don't care basically because they're just post-economic. And now in the same way you had a bunch of settlers move west in order to just like go, you know, it's been happening the whole time. It happened with the conquistadors.
Yeah.
But instead of being a physical location, which is really visceral, it's weird, abstract value land of like what humans value in the virtual world.
Yeah, pretty much. And there's market dynamics there as well. Because I mean, um, if you look at like um, what people use these blockchains for, like there's different applications. So like if you're just sending USDT, for example, like you should look for the cheapest chain because what are you valuing there? You're valuing like the transaction fee and the speed of the transaction. And that's like a that's why people here use Tron, right? And there's another reason, which is like the business development thing of like just marketing. I think like one of the lesser told stories on like crypto Twitter or whatever is like the degree to which various chains have been successful or not in acquiring mind share in like the places where people actually need this stuff. Um, like like Tron has done an incredibly good job of uh, just like, this is like basic business, right? Just like pounding the pavement, like you know the 21st century equivalent of going door to door and just telling people to use your chain, right? And that works. And they've done that in Latin America and other places in the world, and people use it. Like that's literally it. There's no I don't think there's any secret sauce. There's no technological innovation, which is, I'm not saying that is a bad thing. It's just look what you can do if you actually just go out there and get people to use your chain.
Yeah, super interesting.
So like, you know, people who don't know that would probably be like, well, why are they using Tron and not Solana? Like Solana is so much better. Like I think it's faster, right? I think it's cheaper. I'm not 100% sure, but um, but yeah, like they use Tron because they use Tron. And if you know how terrible crypto UX can be and is. And so if you're already on a chain and you have a wallet and you know how to use it, like the switching costs are non-negligible, especially when you have to convince like your friends and like some random person you're doing business with to switch as well.
Yeah, that's a
So
good point. Okay. Oh, this goes right into distributed computing because now I get that distributed computing is solving the UX problem.
yeah, no, that's definitely one of the things. And this is bringing us back to that and why crypto is like the meaningful catalyst here. Because I genuinely don't think that like, you know, peer-to-peer personal computers, kind of like new software architecture would be really useful or interesting without the emergence of crypto as like a useful thing to do on your computer.
Yeah.
Because like, here's another way of putting it, that we've been talking about it a lot at Keynote is, if you look at like what digital data is valuable on the internet, it's often curated by a first party or a central service. Let's take Airbnb as an example here, right? Like that's a very valuable business because they take something in the physical world and they digitize it and they present it to you through like an API essentially.
Yep.
They've, they like do a lot of work to make sure like, oh, okay, so like this person is a host and this is their house and it's a real house. It exists in the physical world, and I don't even know how it works. It's probably very tenuous and fragile, but it somehow stays functional. But like that's an example of a thing where like the actual value of this does come from it being centralized. Like it's not a decentralized thing. If it was a decentralized thing, like I could just ask the person who owns the house to say, hey, can I stay in it, please? And that was how it worked before.
Yes.
And that people did that, right? But then where did the value come from that made it like, a much better experience? And I can say that like as a user, it's like I've rented houses from people before, not on Airbnb, and I've done it on Airbnb, and there's value. Like it's better to be able to like Google a city and pick a house
Let me,
based on
save that thought, because there's one particular thing that's so interesting, because now I hate Airbnb. It's also the only option. I hate Airbnb.
Yes.
There's one of particular thing, which is that, well, the two particular things, you can never know how noisy it's going to be at night, and you can never know how it smells.
Yeah, true.
If we were to solve those two things, and then also the delta between what locals pay and then what is on Airbnb for a monthly rate. Those are the kind of the main problems. But yeah, go on.
No, that's all absolutely true. And yet, like, it's still a lot better than the non-existence of that, because in addition to not knowing how loud it is and how much it smelled, like you could just be straight up getting scammed if it was
Yes.
peer to peer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Interesting.
The house could not exist, or it could be like a construction site. And that kind of stuff, like there's value in removing that and being what in crypto world gets called an oracle, right? So like there's some real world data, and that company is acting as an oracle, a trusted oracle. And they don't need a blockchain to do that because you have to trust them specifically, right? So this is where it gets interesting, is like before crypto, that was the only kind of data on the internet, was data that somebody or some entity like curated and put somewhere, and you like trusted them as like the source of that data. Like a bank is like this, but for money. And so like in that world where all of that data is coming from these like services, what's the value add in not just using that service? Because you're already trusting them, they're already curating the data, they probably have a better handle on it than you. Like just use that service.
We
So
don't have,
crypto, yeah.
or yeah, what's the problem with crypto? You were probably just about to answer this.
Well, so the solution, or the new thing that crypto lets you do, is not have to trust that thing. And so far the use cases for that are somewhat limited, but they're growing. So right now, as you mentioned, it's like money. There's crypto money, and then there's stable coins. There's digital assets. So like, meme coins, NFTs of various, usefulness. There's, on-chain finance, so more complex like lending structures. And then there's like, the nascent growth of like, what I would call like real user products. So like people trading music or art or ideas, and doing, doing sort of that next layer of interesting stuff on blockchains. Although it's been slow to come, and I think this is also the place where the distributed computing comes in. But so to get to the point, it's like now finally you have a thing where you're not relying on a trusted oracle for some interesting digital data. And so now there's an impedance mismatch between that data and a centralized service. So now, like, all of a sudden, like, it's kind of actually frustrating and difficult to use like distributed computing in the form of blockchains, and the old like stack, the old lamp stack where you've got a server running a web service. And this gets reflected in a couple of ways. So like one is like when you're writing a modern day crypto application, you have a front end and a database, well, kind of a database, but no back end. So we're missing like a piece of the new stack. So like you've got the blockchain that you're running on, maybe even multiple blockchains. You've got like a website that serves a UI, and it does a little bit of like local storage in your browser, cookies, whatever. But there's no back end. There's no place to store non-ephemeral data.
Non-ephemeral data. So that's the difference between well, okay, no. So the blockchain is the distributed database. All right.
Well, I say kind of for that because they're not really supposed to be, but they get shoehorned into that role because there's no backend, because
So
there's no
okay,
real database.
so that's what distributed computing is doing, is taking that distributed database and actually turning it into a distributed database. So
Exactly.
so in terms of this new stack that is emerging, instead of the traditional front end and back end for Web 2.0, you have a front end, which is on the legacy web. You have
Yeah.
a blockchain, which I want to ask next. What is the role that the blockchain
Yeah.
solves? And then we will have a distributed database in which two people can compute with no third party telling them what is allowed in that database.
Yeah, exactly. So now that there's these data sources that aren't just centralized oracles, there's an impedance mismatch between reading from the decentralized oracle of like some chain somewhere and computing. Um, there's an impedance mismatch that didn't exist before, and we're trying to solve that.
Okay, so is
Exactly.
Kinode a competitor to Chainlink?
No, definitely not. So yeah, so like Chainlink is all about like sort of bringing oracles, bringing that data on chain. So that's like a really useful thing to do. It's a useful protocol. That Keynote is about taking the data that is on chain and letting people actually write like programs that use it. So going back to like what a modern crypto app looks like today, they get shoehorned into using a blockchain as a database, and blockchains are not like good databases. So that causes like some of the UX and other problems that people have with crypto apps. So let's like look at like what one of those apps looks like. You've got like a contract on chain, or a set of contracts, right? These are responsible for manipulating the key logic of the program. So the balances in people's various bank accounts, right? And the NFTs that they own, and the current state of their loan, right? These are all like, those happen inside of a smart contract on chain. Um, then you've got a website that is a very complex piece of code, because it has to connect to an RPC endpoint, which is basically an API that you use to actually read the data that's on a blockchain. This is a trusted piece of software, by the way, where you're usually just connecting to somebody else's node and reading state from the blockchain from them. And generally, like that's a trusted process where they could lie to you, and it would be kind of hard to know. Um, so you that's happening on the front end. You're reading the latest data from the chain. Um, and then you're displaying it in a UI, and you're prompting the user to generate transactions in their wallet of choice and submit them to the chain in order to update that on-chain state. So there's something wrong here. There's something wrong, and a really good example of how it plays out in reality is NFT trading platforms like OpenSea and Blur. So these are really big websites where they get a ton of users, and those users are looking at pictures and making trades, right? And making financial decisions based on that. So it's kind of silly when you put it that way. But no, I mean, I use these products. So how can they do that? They can't do that by like reading from chain, because it's a ton of data and it's updated, and some of it's not even on chain. The pictures are often not on chain. So they have a traditional Web 2 backend stack where they run cloud services, and they as a company host and provide APIs to like save these images, read updates. They do caching, right? They cache data so that they can serve it more effectively to users through a website. All very like traditional Web 2 engineering. Um, so that sort of like highlights the one of the missing pieces here, which is like a backend. Why can't this website like run in a way, in the same way that the blockchain runs? Like it connects to a trusted data provider that's promising you that they're reading the latest data from the chain, and then they use their own backend to cache and serve content, and then finally they serve a website to you through a URL, and then you get to make, you get to interact with that. So that's like sort of the modern stack, and you see this in like games that people are making, crypto games, financial protocols. Every crypto app is like this. Does that
Yes. Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sense?
Okay. So there's this one piece that is missing from this computing environment, or maybe there's a few pieces, but there's something in there that is a trusted process, and then the technical elements of that trusted process are blocking anybody from creating a fully functioning website that can interact with a blockchain. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So like this is like a pretty difficult application. First of all, it's difficult to write, to be like, just from a pure developer experience perspective. These are like kind of difficult programs to write. And second of all, they're missing key pieces to make them like, and again, it's like, it's not just to make it morally correct of like, oh, it's truly trustless, right? Truly trustless is like, oh, you have to run your own node. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the just from a usability perspective, just like actually making this a good app. It's really hard to do. And it's kind of impossible. I would say it's impossible actually to do a rich, like a really rich experience with that current stack. So that is like the really that's like the North Star for what we're trying to do. This is like, I there's been no pivot away from this specific problem. This is always what I've cared about doing. And yeah, like I think we finally have a stack that's going to be able to do this.
Okay.
We've been building these apps, and it's been cool.
What are you calling the stack, rather than, other than Kinode? What are you calling the stack, or what are the well, okay, well, here's a better question. I with my interview with Aleph Dow 2 days ago, there was talk of WebAssembly, and I finally went and looked at what WebAssembly is. It's some sort of machine code that allows you to interact directly with hardware or virtual hardware. I don't understand that part. What role does WebAssembly play? Why did you guys choose that?
I mean, honestly, it's not even like super critical to the problem that I just described and like the solution. It's just an implementation detail. But I am really happy with it. It's, I think, definitely the right choice for us. Basically, Wasm is a new compile target that really has just come into like use in the last like 10 years, not even that. And it's been developed by all the sort of like classic big Web 2 FANG names. And all it does is just let you compile your code into a virtual machine that you can run in the browser and a bunch of other places. And it's stable, it's deterministic. Um, and yeah, it's just a good place to compile your code to. And
Okay.
it's perfect for us because like Well, this will answer the question is, what do we need out of like a backend that runs on people's computers and can run anywhere and lets you do distributed computing? What do you need out of that backend? You need it to be sandboxed. You need it to be like constrainable by resources, and you need it to be easy to use. I guess those would be the top three things, and Wasm does all of that very well.
Okay. Why do you need to do those things?
Basically because it really boils down to like what developers want and expect. So like if you're writing code, well, also what users expect. So like if you're writing code that's going to be installed by people, it really helps if you can sandbox it really hard and make it so like one app that you install does not kill all of your other apps and take all your money, right? That's a really that's a really useful property. And you can do, again, you can do that in a bunch of ways. Like this is a very much like in the weeds implementation detail, and you know, people shouldn't be religious about it unless, you know, unless they've got a hole in their spiritual life. But but the like yeah, there's a bunch of ways to sandbox stuff, and Wasm is like a really easy plug and play solution that other people are using and has a ton of like momentum behind it. Like people are building really cool tools for this like compile target.
Yeah, so this is the developer mindshare, and that goes back to the Ethereum sort of thing. Is that one of the reasons why Ethereum is so powerful is that the developer mindshare, like the people who make money. It was so crazy in the 2017 run up. I first found out, there's a great story. I first found out about Ethereum through one of my best friends, who's sort of like a muse for me. He told me, he was just like, oh yeah, this guy on he's talking about Ethereum, it's gonna be the next Bitcoin. And by that time, the first time I had ever bought Bitcoin was to buy some substances and then those substances turned out to be extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Prime Horizon. And then I forgot about it until 2017. And then he told me about Ethereum. And I was like, I had been like looking at Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, maybe this isn't just this random thing. Maybe this thing is gonna be an actual thing, like, and it just will continue to go up. And so he told me about Ethereum, and it was so funny, the chain of events that I'd heard about Ethereum because of this guy posting on Facebook, which my friend saw, that turned out right at that time. But then later on, went on a crazy psychedelic bender, telling everybody to sell all of it, Ethereum, Bitcoin, everything, sell it all. Maybe it might have actually been good advice back at that time to
Sell at the
help.
top. That's a good vision.
Yeah, for totally wrong reasons. And so but that run up in 2017 was really interesting. And so Ethereum got all the developer mindshare and became this titan, but maybe like sort of archaic titan. Like, I guess, yeah, well, that's a good question for you. What does Ethereum do right now? We already went into it a bit about, but what does it?
Yeah, well, I definitely don't think it's archaic. I think there's like definitely some interesting debate happening, and I think it's somewhat ideologically motivated. Um, Keep in mind that like Ethereum explicitly chose to use rollups as the scaling solution, right? So like, I mean, the not nice way of putting it is like if you're using the layer one for stuff, like that's on you. Like why, you know? And of course, like there's a huge gap between that in theory and that in practice, because like, you know, for example, when you want to buy some pesos in Argentina, like you're gonna have a hard time explaining to the person that like, oh, I've got USDC on Optimism and you've got it on Arbitrum, and so we need to do some stuff. So I know that there's a giant gap in like the usability, but like it is the case that like using a layer two on Ethereum is like the right way to use that blockchain as a you
Yes.
know, as an individual. And I would also note that like the layer twos on Ethereum are the blockchains that are doing the most interesting things, the most rich applications. They've got the developers that are the most capable and intelligent. And yeah, it's like it's really promising what people are doing on layer twos. And there's so many of them too, which is really cool.
And is there, from speaking from an investment angle, is there any sort of value that is captured by any of the layer twos, or does it all accrue to layer one?
Oh yeah, there's tons of value captured by layer twos. I mean, in the same way that, like, you know, another layer one can capture value by presenting block space. Again, like it's sort of like a simple real estate-esque equation of like, okay, you're providing some block space to a market. What will people pay you for that? Um, and so if you look at, like, I mean, look, if you look at like Arbitrum versus Solana, for example, like you've got DeFi applications on both, right? The DeFi application users on Arbitrum are paying, well, before the upgrade that happened today, which is, you know, exciting, the Denkun like blob upgrade for Ethereum layer one. Arbitrum users were paying like, you know, 50 cents to $1 for transactions. And then, you know, Solana users are paying like, you know, half of a cent or less. And so it's like, oh, okay, so like why are people doing that? Well, obviously, like it's a free market. The people on Arbitrum are paying more because they value the product more, right? Like that's an equivalent way of looking at it. And the same goes for like Ethereum L1. Like why are you transacting on Ethereum L1? Oh, well, I guess you value doing that so much that you're willing to pay like $50 or $100 in gas for that privilege. um,
So why would somebody, so what is the, why besides moving Ethereum from one place to another, would a whale on Ethereum actually have any use of Ethereum?
well, if you actually have like $1 billion in assets, like security does become like a non-theoretical issue, right? So that's one aspect, is that if you have a significant amount of value on chain, you do suddenly become very interested in the game theory and mechanism of how that money stays yours. So that's one.
And that's why somebody would use Ethereum over another layer or another blockchain, because it
That's
has.
why, yeah, like an individual, right? But then the more interesting thing is like, why would a roll up do this? Because if you look, I mean, if you look at what people are doing, by the way, like, um, and again, like this isn't even my area of expertise, so
Yeah.
like I think other people could like maybe describe this better or like productively disagree, um, but I like talking about it, so I'll continue. So like, you know, Solana is doing layer twos. Like there will be layer twos that settle to Solana. Other blockchains will do this if there's enough demand for their block space. Like layer twos are a very fruitful scaling solution. I mean, Bitcoin is getting really exciting because of layer twos, right? People are building layer twos on Bitcoin now. Whether they exactly fit the definition of a layer two is like up for debate, and there's, you know, soft forks and things that'll change in the Bitcoin protocol to better support layer twos if they become, you know, a popular thing. But yeah, like that's a very popular way to scale block space because the mechanism works really well. We can talk, by the way, about like layer twos. I built one, so there's a lot of useful, yeah, there's a lot of useful mechanisms to discuss there. But like one of the key points is like the layer two, if correctly built, which again, like most are not, or most are like in a pre functioning stage, but a complete layer two fully inherits the security of the layer one chain, the financial security. So that's really important, right? Because you're again talking about like, well, if somebody has $1 billion, like they really care about like the security of the chain they're using. If you can build a layer two that successfully posts a ton of block space to that layer one and fully inherits the security, now you have a really exciting solution because you have speed and cheapness, but also the economic security, which is like this is why Ethereum is doing it this way. Like that's the golden ticket. That's like the magic combination. And it's again like, yeah, not easy to do that in just like a single layer one solution, I don't think. don't think that exists. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go back into distributed computing because this is all related to computing. And this is the fun part about this interview is that there's all these things that connect to the distributed computing layer that I still don't understand. And then there's the AI piece, which I would love to talk to as well. If
For
you
sure.
have a hard stop at the hour, let me know. Otherwise, we can continue and let me know how much longer you can go.
Yeah, we can keep going for
Yeah.
sure. But yeah, let's move off blockchains before I get in trouble and say something wrong.
Yeah. Distributed computing, what have I not asked that's really important to know about distributed computing for people who are interested in sort of sovereignty over their data or their crypto?
So um, two things I'll say. One is that I do agree with you in the sense that this will not be a mainstream activity until people are sort of abstracted away from the concept. So like you really the end game for this tool Keynote is that you shouldn't really have to know that you're using it.
Mm.
Um, so building apps, building products on top that are like not, they take care of that for you and they abstract away from you. It's sort of analogous to account abstraction on blockchains. So that's one thing. And then two is that there's still going to be a lot of centralized services, and that's not a bad thing. So basically, one thing that we've discovered while building some of the use cases out on Keynote and in a very much like a B2B or backend way, like we're not building for users really yet, maybe never. It's mostly building for developers, but we've discovered that like there's a ton of situations where um, you don't want to run a node like obviously there's a lot of really productive ways to like build an app where every user runs a node, but there's also a lot of things to do where like a company is running a node, a centralized service is running a node. Like let's go back to that Airbnb example, right? Or something else, right? Like some service that you're providing to the world. Like oftentimes the best way to do that is to post up on the internet and host a web service and host a server. And so the juice comes from productively integrating that into the network. So we're doing quite a bit of work to make that sort of like an easy developer process of essentially building a provider and exposing it to the network. And I'll segue this into AI by saying that like this is the way that people are going to like bring their GPUs online and bring their AI APIs online and let people use them in a decentralized way. Is basically acting as a service provider in a protocol over a peer-to-peer network.
Okay. Okay. Now we're getting into territory where I'm. I did not understand what you just said, but I got the gist of it. It's basically network protocol. What is a network protocol?
Just, I mean, it's just like a language that an application speaks, right, over the network to get stuff done.
And what is the network protocol or the most important network protocols that are currently be using? It's HTTP, right?
Oh, well, okay, so yeah, so that's like the transport protocol.
The
I mean,
trans.
that's what the TP stands for. Like that's the protocol that creates the network. The thing is, once you have that, once you've agreed on that, then there's a whole nother layer of protocols that are applications, right? So, for example, right, if you've got like an HTTP server and you're hosting an API, right? Like maybe you're presenting like some data to me, like a list of your favorite songs, right? And you're going to use a specific format to serve that data. So if I do a query on your HTTP server on a specific path, I'm going to get back a piece of data, and that data is going to be bytes, right? Like bytes are the universal language of computing. There's bytes. we're using bytes. And then, but what's on top of that? There's a whole, there's a whole thing to unpack of like, okay, there's bytes that represent a text string. That text string is like UTF-8, right? That UTF-8 is formatted into JSON. There's a JSON schema, and that's a protocol. And then finally, your protocol is like, you're saying, I'm going to give you a JSON object that is a dictionary of strings, and those strings are the titles of my favorite songs. That's the API. That's the protocol that we're speaking as users, well, or applications, right? It's the same thing.
And so
And that's what I'm talking about.
so it's in that space is almost infinite because it all depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
So what's the connection with AI? I didn't understand the connection with AI with that.
So basically, if you have a graphics card, right, and you want to run like a model on it, like let's say you want to run like Mistral 7 billion, right? You can run a large language model that is like pretty good, but it still requires like a beefy computer. Maybe I can't do it on my phone. So you present that as an API. So I, on my phone, like hit your server and I ask it to complete some text for me, and then you give it a response. And that's what that looks like as a provider. So the current way of doing that is like there's a ton of these APIs out there, and you just hit one of them, and then you get your AI. That's how you do it.
Okay. And so what does a Keynote enabled world look like with AI?
So this provider model. So actually, this is kind of interesting you bring it up. Actually, like a lot of this is already the case, I think. I think this is kind of a white pill on AI. So there's already a ton of competing companies that serve APIs to give you AI text
Already
completion.
distributed.
It's already a little bit distributed, right? I mean, there's like dozens of these, and they're competing on cost, they're competing on performance. And so you can really imagine a world where like the cutting edge of AI is pretty distributed, because as soon as it comes out, a ton of companies copy it or acquire it somehow, and then they serve it to you on an API, and they all compete for the lowest cost and the best quality. And so you kind of have a world where like, you know, there's actually pretty good access to AI even without running it yourself or having a friend run it.
Unless there's government regulation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, one is like there's government regulation, or two, it was just like scarier, is that one company really runs away with it and dominates, and their AI is like so much better, and the only way to hit it is through their API, and they extract control through that.
Seemed likely before Mr. All showed up, thank God. And then
Yeah, it's
Claude
still
3 started to make waves.
yeah, it's like it's almost like still, I mean, feels like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop a little bit, right? With like GPT 4.5 or 5. Like that outcome is still possible, right? So I agree fully with that. But yeah, so that there is a valid reason to do this in a peer-to-peer way. And to answer your original question, what using AI looks like with Keynote is that you have a ton of providers running on this network. You can be a provider. It's very easy to be a provider if you have the requisite hardware or whatever you need, and you just plug into this protocol that's running on the network that is basically an open market for completions. So yeah, I mean, a bunch of people are building stuff like this. I wouldn't say it's particularly novel. And the real alpha that we have is the integration with everything else. So we have this with crypto and with personal compute, and with these Wasm programs that we've built a pretty good, if I say so myself, application environment around.
And so right now, if somebody wanted to use Keynote, they're most likely a developer. And what would they do?
Yeah, well, I guess I can like plug our stuff now. Yeah, it's only for developers. We don't have like a, hey, come use this as a user thing. Although Holium's going to release something really soon to the world. I've been using it. It's just sort of their first product built on Keynote. But yeah, if you're a developer, like I would really like you to check out the application framework that we've built. You can think of it as an application framework. It's like, it's a new tool for building web services, building apps. You can use any programming language you want, and you can just sort of come in and build an app for this platform. We've got a Discord that we, support developers in and talk in, and then we've got like a book, which is the sort of documentation end to end, like how to use this thing as a developer. Yeah, we've onboarded some developers, and we're going to keep onboarding more developers, and those people are going to be the ones who make the user products. And again, like in many of those cases, like the user will be able to just like log in and do something, and not have to worry so much about like running their own node. But of course, as a user, you can run your own node, um, and uh,
Interesting.
and you can get somebody else to run your node too. We have a hosting platform that I think it's in ready to use now, but it's not like it's not like a website of like, hey, log in here and do this. Like it's an open source hosting platform that anybody can spin up and use alongside their app, right? So like if you build a new crypto app, you should probably spin up a hosting service to onboard users in a really seamless way.
Oh,
For free.
oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, this is all making me think a lot more. So I imagine you guys are going to have courses and such for new people to kind of go into at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're going to go really hard on like, getting developers to come on and build, and at most of the focus there again is like with crypto, right? So like um I think the person that this would be the most interesting for is somebody who has built or is building a new product um on top of a blockchain. It can be really any blockchain, but it's nice if it's an Ethereum layer 2 because that's where we have the tightest integrations. Um,
Wait, and so Ethereum layer 2, which one?
Any of them.
Any of them?
Yeah.
Which one do you use?
We have a contract on Optimism right now, but we're mostly in testnet. Like we don't really like have a permissionless release. So we're still in testnet phase. So the Sepolia testnet, and we're still actively developing the platform, which is why, you know, that's why I say like we will have courses. Like you asked, why don't we have those? It's because we're still working on like the underlying platform, and we want to get it into a place where it's stable and you can just build on it permissionlessly. And that's a thing, by the way, that I'm really passionate about, the permissionless nature of it, because like if you look at early Ethereum, which was, as you said earlier, like pretty magical environment. The thing that happened was like they spent a year or so building it, and then they just put it out there, and then from that day on there were no strings attached. It was just use this thing, like it's there, you can build on it, you don't have to ask us. In fact, you can actively try to destroy us. Like like there's no rules, right? Use this thing, it's never going to break. It's not never going to break, but it's never going to change in a way that's breaking a breaking change, so to speak.
Is
So
one
we're
of
going to get to that point, and we're gonna follow that playbook and just have a 1.0 release that is supported forever, and that'll be the network, and it'll grow as it needs to, and it'll have soft forks and hard forks if it needs to, but that'll be the platform.
Interesting. Will one of the benefits of this solve the security issue of all the exploits? Like it seems like so many people haven't lost money through the blockchain of Ethereum, but they've lost money through interacting with the blockchain of Ethereum, maybe through MetaMask exploits, maybe through all those things. Is that one of the value adds of Keynote?
Um, yeah, yeah, and that kind of brings us to a thing that we're building on top of Keynote right now, which are zk rollups. in a specific way that's called like a validium. So I definitely agree with you. Like one of my biggest issues with like Ethereum is definitely like solidity and the programming environment. Obviously, it's like a really um,
Like,
capricious and dangerous like environment. It's, as you know, like billions of dollars have been flushed down the drain by exploits and stuff, which is like frustratingly avoidable, I would say. But you know, you got to work with what you got. Um, so like when we were building a layer two, I was excited to be writing a virtual machine that was not like the EVM and that was going to be hopefully like better, right, for security and more sort of reliable. Um, so we did do that, but then some other things kind of made that not viable. So we're still though very interested in that problem, and so that's where like the zk rollups come in. This is an example too, by the way, of Wasm just being this like programming environment that you get so many wins for free just because there's momentum and tailwinds. Um, so a really good example of that is like a couple weeks ago, SP1 got released, which is a zkVM that runs in Rust. And what's really awesome about it is like we we knew it was coming out and we were excited about it. And separately from that, we knew that there would be this product. Like we knew that this was going to be a thing, and we knew that ZK was going to be commoditized in this way, where there's just going to be a bunch of virtual machines. A lot of them would be easy to use. A lot of them would be cheap or free or open source or whatever, and we could just use one of them. So yeah, SP1 came out, and with like it was literally like one line of code that's since been resolved. Like you can just use it in Wasm. So you can write a program that compiles to Wasm in Rust. You can prove that program, and then you can run the prover and the verifier inside Wasm. So now you have like Kinode peer-to-peer apps that can generate ZK proofs, send ZK proofs to one another over the network, and then prove or verify them. Or they can generate the proof and then other people can verify it.
got it.
So really exciting. And that was like one of these things that just came for free with the system,
Huh.
with Wasm and everything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so SP1 is a really cool general purpose prover, and we've already written like some zk rollups that use that.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So what's the website that they can go to check out Keynote?
Kinode.org.
Keynote.org. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
All right, we're out of time.
Yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you later.